So, I've been seeing people losing with one of the most easiest comps in the game, and I feel like that's just due to the lack of knowledge. But don't worry, my friends, because Exterior is here to tell you how to properly play Ashe Warden comp. In this video, we're going to cover the strongest items, strongest units, and the strongest augments. Ashe's best in slot item is Rage Blade. This item is the best on her hands down because it gives her enough attack speed where she can keep autoing to keep doing DPS, and it allows her to keep ramping up mana so she can keep casting her ability, which is pretty strong at the moment. Second to that would be Last Whisper. This item is not mandatory because if you have an Even Shroud on the board, it's fine to not use this item, but I would prefer Last Whisper over Even Shroud on Ashe because this item allows her to gain her crit and it gives her attack speed and it gives her armor break. So that armor break allows you to keep doing extra damage to the front line so you can just delete them so you can kill the back line quicker later. And then I would say her best last item would be Gunblade because you're playing 4 tank front lines and Ashe has enough damage to kill everything anyways with the first 2 items. So if you have Gunblade, she can keep healing her front line and you can just keep doing damage with Ashe. And then I would say to force Rage Blade no matter what, but for whatever circumstances, if you cannot build it, a red buff is fine. Or if you do have a Rage Blade and you can't get a Last Whisper, red buff would be still okay because this item gives you a lot of attack speed and it gives you anti-heal on the board, but that means you don't build Sunfire then if you have a red buff. And then if you cannot build a Last Whisper, Giant Slayer is still okay because most of the time you can probably build an Even Shroud anyways later in the game, so if you need an armor break item, you can build that. But Giant Slayer is very powerful for Ashe because it gives her some AD, it gives her attack speed, and it also kills tanks even quicker because the more HP the unit has, the more damage you do with this item. And then if you don't need a Gunblade, you could just build either one of the heavy AD items such as Deathblade or IE, so Ashe can get extra damage so you can kill things quicker. And then if you get an Ornn artifact item, the best one would be Sniper's Focus. This item gives Ashe a lot of damage and is very good, like a Rageblade substitute if you cannot get Rageblade, but I would prefer to have a Rageblade and a Sniper's Focus so you can do extra damage with this item. And this item is very powerful on snipers in general because it gives you +1 range and snipers already get +1 range, so you have 7 range total. Therefore, if you put the sniper in the corner, they don't really have to move anywhere. They can just shoot from afar and do extra damage from where they're standing. Next to that is actually a really good Rageblade substitute. If you don't have Rageblade, you can go for Wit's End instead. This item is basically similar to the Sniper's Focus idea, but the thing is it doesn't give you +1 range. It just converts some of your AD into magic damage. So when you auto attack, you basically do some sort of AP as well. And this item also gives you Omni Vamp, so it makes Ashe last a little bit longer with a lot of attack speed. But if you decide to go for both Rageblade and Wit's End, it's still fine. It's a pretty good Rageblade substitute. And then lastly, Collector is a very decent Ashe item. It's just a good AD item overall because this item gives you crit and it gives you execution if the unit's below 15%, and you also gain some gold. It's only a chance to get gold if you get a kill with it. The thing about this item is that it's very good for early game, so you can tempo and kill things quicker. So when you put on Ashe later in the game, it's actually somewhat useful for her, but it's not the best. And I would say another Ornn artifact to mention would be Trinity Force. If you just have it and then you don't have any other good items for Ashe, you could just throw Trinity Force on her. If not, you could just throw in the other sniper units, it's okay. And then with a really strong backline, you need a really strong front line. Amumu is very good for one of the best tanks to have on Ashe because he's, for one, a Warden, which is the best tanks to have right now at the moment, and he's also a Porcelain, which makes it a very good synergy with Ashe since she needs that Porcelain trait so she can activate extra attack speed, and the damage reduction for Amumu is actually really good. His best in slot items would be Gargoyle Stoneplate, so he can actually keep tanking stuff a lot longer. The reason why not Bramble Vest because a lot of things have base armor already, so having the extra magic resist and gaining some flat AD stats is good enough against the AD units. And then since the meta is actually AP heavy and AP is actually kind of one-shot this set, having a Declaw is actually really useful because it nullifies that magic damage and it also gives them some health regen on top of that. Sunfire is a very good first item slam and is actually pretty decent on Mumu as well because you're going to need some anti-heal on the board. So if you have a Sunfire on a Mumu, since he will be the last one standing, he can just keep burning the whole board with this item. Other alternative items, if you don't want to put Sunfire on a Mumu, you could just throw in a Redemption on him, which is fine, so it gives him extra healing. But then you have to figure out how to put anti-heal on the board somehow, so maybe having a Morellicon or as a red buff on Aphelios is fine, or having Sunfire in a different tank is okay too. And then same thing like the whole Redemption thing, having a Warmonks is okay on a Mumu as well, because this item is actually pretty good if you have to slam it at the beginning, since flat HP is actually really strong early game, so putting it on a Mumu later is actually pretty decent as well. And then the same idea of Warmonks, Adaptive Helm is a pretty good first item slam as well for a tank or backline, but having it as a frontline item is pretty decent as well, since the more units that would hit it, the more that unit can cast. Another thing that's really important to note about Redemption is it's kind of mandatory to have it on the board because the extra healing for Wardens is actually very powerful for them. So if you want to put it on either Alawi or even on Nautilus is actually pretty good on him, then it's good to do that because for Nautilus, for example, it gives him more mana so he can keep casting his ability or cast it quicker. And then the best Ornn artifacts you could put on Amumu or even tanks in general would be an Eternal Winter. This item allows you to stall the board because what this item does is whoever hits the unit for a certain amount of time, they would freeze and be stunned for a couple of seconds. And then because you want to stall, having an Anima Visage is actually a pretty good item as well. If you cannot get the Eternal Winter, this item is also a good alternative because for one, it gives you magic resist, and then two, it gives you a lot of health regen on that tank unit. And then similarly to the Anima Visage, having a Diamond Hands is really good on tanks in general as well, since most tanks are AP, and this item does give AP, and it gives HP, and then what this item does is, if they're about to hit 50% HP, it drops you 1 gold, so that means it's a very good first item to get. And on top of that, it makes them invulnerable for 1.5 seconds, so you can stall the fight even longer. After knowing what items you want to put on your main units, now this is the whole board you want to play. Most of us already know how to play this board. It's just basic 4 Warden with 4 Sniper, and they have a lot of splash traits together, such as Caitlyn with Ghostly Alawi, and then Ashe with Porcelain Amumu. And then when you hit level 9, you can throw in Syndra to throw in 3 Faded with Set, Syndra, and Aphelios, and then the Faded Bound you want is Aphelios and Set, and then Syndra also provides Arcanus with Alawi, which is a very good splash trait to have. And then if you have a Sniper emblem, you could throw it on Syndra, and it'll be better to bound Aphelios with Syndra, but if you have a level 2 Set with a Bloodthirster, then it will just be better to bound either Set with Syndra, if she has pretty good items with Sniper Focus, or just bound Set with Aphelios. And then in order to win with this board, you have to level 2 everything. And most of the time, I notice that people cannot level 2 everything here because the way how they level is wrong. And they're playing gambling with their rolls with only less than 30 gold when they hit level 8 at 4-1. Now, I'm not saying that you cannot hit this board with 30 gold at level 8 at 4-1. I'm just saying that it's mostly impossible to do that every game. So therefore, I would say if you do not have more than 70 gold at 4-1, you should not hit level 8 at 4-1 to roll for this board because it just takes way too much gold to play this board. Therefore, I would suffice to play this board instead is to roll down at level 7 at 4-1 if you have less than 70 gold because this board is actually easier to hit and is powerful enough for you to fast 9 with too. The idea is to have an Aphelios 2 carry with the Ashe items, and a Mumu 2, an Alawi 2, and a Nar 2. And then as you're rolling down for these units, you can also pick up a Nautilus, Syndra, and Ashe along the way. But if you don't hit them, then you can look for substitutes. Like for example, like Syndra, if you can't find a Syndra, then you can just throw an Ari2. If you cannot find an Ashe, you can just throw a Caitlyn 2. If you cannot find a Nautilus, you can just throw either a Jax or a Garen 2 instead. Or unless you're lucky, if you find a Set for whatever reason, you can use Set instead as well, and he's also a Faded unit. And when you hit level 8, you throw in a Kindred, because it activates the Dryad trait with Nar, and it also activates the Faded trait with Aphelios, and you want to pair them up because it gives Aphelios attack speed, and it gives him damage. If you're in a spot that you're getting contested, this is the way to do it. So you hit fast 9 afterwards, once you play this board, and then look for Ashe 2 over time, because the other Ashe players will probably be dying by then, and then you could just pick up Ashe 2 right after when you hit level 9. Or if you're just lucky enough, then you could just play Ashe 2 and just play the regular board here, and you should be fine. In order to get to the Ashe board, we have to learn how to play the early game. So, the best opener would be Ink Shadows. The reason why Ink Shadows is a pretty strong opener for this, because you can start with 2 Warden instantly with 2 Snipers. And you can throw in a +1 Ghostly to get that extra damage on the board. And then Ink Shadow is very powerful early game as well, because you get one pretty powerful item, either damage or tank item. And then you want to put the Ashe items on Senna, because if you 2-star her, it's pretty powerful on her. And on top of that, when you hit level 8, it's easier finding a Senna 2 than it is finding a Caitlyn 2. And then for whatever tanks you get, you can just put the Amumu items on them first, either Garen or Jax, whichever one you hit level 2, just put the tank items on them first. But I would say if you want to keep win streaking, just slam a Sunfire first, because it's a pretty powerful item for your first item slam. And then for your Ashe items, you should always prioritize having a Rage Blade no matter what. If you cannot build this item, therefore she's not going to be strong enough. And then another alternative opener, if you cannot get the Senna and Caitlyn opener, you can do Story Weaver opener. Is okay as well, because if you have a Sivir 2, she works really well with Rage Blade. And same thing with the tank thing I said earlier. If you have either a Jax 2 or a Garen 2, just put the items on them, it's fine. And then now for the best augments you could choose for Ashe Warden would be Longshot. This augment is very powerful for snipers in general because it gives them extra attack speed, and if you shoot a certain amount of units, you also get a free sniper's focus. So you get a free Ornn artifact right there and then. And then another good augment to choose would be Sniper's Crest. This augment is very powerful because you can play +1 sniper pretty easily, or you can play 6 sniper as well at level 9, having a Kog'Maw and throwing Sniper's Focus on a set. Or you could just throw it on Syndra, so she can do extra damage for your board as well. And then Spirit Guardians is very powerful since you can be playing 4 Warden anyways. This augment also allows your Wardens to be extra tanky because they have bonus damage reduction on top of their bonus damage reduction already. And then pumping up either 2 or 3 is very good because it gives you more attack speed over time. And then speaking of attack speed, Best Friends 1 specifically is very powerful right now, but 2 is also pretty decent as well because it gives you extra attack speed and it gives you some armor. Essentially, as you can tell, the best augments to choose from is either a synergy based one such as Sniper or Warden. I would say Warden Crest is something that you kind of don't want because there's no other units that can utilize Warden Crest really well, so therefore I would say to not get it. But attack speed augments are always good, like you have my bow because you get a free bow and extra attack speed on the board, or any other attack speed augments you can find is really good for snipers. And that is it for my Ashe Warden comp guide. If you have any questions or if you want me to cover any other comps, just let me know in the comments down below. Until then, I'll see you guys next time. Later.